When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my son. He never came, but my daughter-in-law posted a family photo. Finally, I made one call and sold something they thought was theirs. Who's Dre? If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed like angry insects as I scrolled through social media from my gurney. Heart palpitations thest at 63. A path notification popped up on my phone just as a nurse checked my for. Melissa had tagged me in a photo. How thoughtful of my daughter-in-law to remember me during my medical emergency. I tapped the screen, expecting maybe a get we message. Instead, I found a perfectly staged family dinner photo. David, my son, grinning at the head of my old dining table. Melissa, radiant in the chair I used to occupy. 12-year-old Kelty were in my house. Well, technically their house, now enjoying what looked like an elaborate homemade meal. Caption made my chest tighten worse. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Family dinner is so much more peaceful. Blessed. Hashtag drama-free. 40-7 likes already. My sister-in-law Nancy had even Kamini stared at that phone screen for a full minute, letting the reality sink in. While I was lying in an emergency room alone, they were celebrating my absence. Not worryeth, nurse returned with discharge papers. Your son is coming to pick you up, right? I looked at the timestamp on Melissa's post. 20 minutes ago, right around the time the hospital would have called David. He knew exactly where I was. He'd chosen family dinner inns actually, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'll call a taxi. As I waited in the hospital lobby, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my real estate agent. Barbara, it's Eleanor Hartwell. Remember that house on Maple Street you said would sell in a week? I'm ready to list it. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this mess. 3 years ago, I thought I was being the perfect mother. Turns out, I was actually being the perfect fool. Like most stories about family betrayal, it started with good intentions and ended with me learning exactly what I was worth to the people I'd loved most. It began right after Tom's funeral. My husband of 35 years had left me the house, his life insurance, and enough savings to live comfortably. I was 60, recently widowed, and suddenly very alone in a 4-bedroom house that felt cavernous without his laughter filling the rooms. David had been so attentive during those first weeks. He'd stop by daily, sometimes with Melissa and Chloe, bringing groceries and checking on me. I thought it was grief bringing us closer together. Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all by yourself, he'd said one evening as we sat on the front porch. It's not healthy. Melissa nodded sympathetically. All those memories everywhere, it must be so hard. I appreciated their concern. The house did feel overwhelming some days. What if, David continued, we moved in here temporarily, just until you decide what you want to do long term? Chloe could have the stability of staying in her school district, and you wouldn't be alone. The idea seemed perfect. I'd downsize to a small apartment nearby, let them take care of the house, and still have my family close. It would just be temporary, Melissa assured me, until we can save enough for our own place. Maybe a year, at most. I should have suspected something when David immediately started talking about property taxes and maintenance costs. How the house was such a financial burden for me on a fixed income. Never mind that Tom's insurance and investments meant I was hardly struggling. Within 6 months, they'd moved in completely. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment across town, paying monthly rent while they lived mortgage-free in the house Tom and I had spent decades paying off. But here's what I didn't know then. They'd been planning this from the start. While I grieved, they'd been systematically redirecting my mail to their new address to help manage my affairs. Bank statements, credit card offers, investment notices, everything started going to my old house where they could screen what I saw. Just temporarily became 2 years. Then 3. Every time I mentioned them moving out, there was a new crisis. David's job was unstable. Melissa was pregnant. False alarm, but they'd already planned for a nursery. Chloe was struggling with middle school transitions. I started to feel like an intruder in my own former home. Visits became awkward. My belongings disappeared into storage or donation piles. They updated the decor, painting over wallpaper Tom and I had chosen together. But the worst part wasn't losing the house. It was becoming invisible in my own family's life. Barbara Henderson answered on the first ring. At 70, she'd been selling houses longer than most real estate agents had been alive. And she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Eleanor, I was wondering when you'd come to your senses about that property. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I want it listed immediately. How immediately are we talking? Because that house will have offers within days. But we need proper preparation. I thought about Melissa's social media post, probably getting more likes by the minute. How fast can you get the paperwork ready? Barbara laughed, the sound sharp with approval. That's the Eleanor I remember from the PTA fundraising wars. But honey, even with rush processing, we're looking at standard disclosure periods, 30 days minimum for closing, assuming cash buyers. Reality hit me. This wasn't going to be the dramatic same-day eviction I'd fantasized about. But maybe that was better. Better meant more thorough. Double quotes, fine. But Barbara, I need complete discretion until we're ready to list. And I need to understand my legal position. Smart woman. I'll bring my attorney friend, Patricia Morgan. She specializes in family property disputes. The next morning, Barbara arrived at my small apartment with Patricia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated competence. Eleanor, Patricia began, spreading documents across my tiny kitchen table. Before we proceed, I need to understand the living arrangement. Was there any formal lease agreement? Any documented rent payments? No, it was just family helping family. Patricia exchanged a look with Barbara. That's both good and bad news. Good because you retain full ownership rights. Bad because they might try to claim tenant protections or even adverse possession after 3 years of continuous occupancy. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. What does that mean? It means we need to be very careful about how we handle the eviction process, and Eleanor, you need to know. They will likely try to fight this legally. Barbara pulled out a thick folder. There's something else we need to discuss. I did some preliminary research on your property. The tax records show several liens were filed and released in the past 18 months. Did you know about those? Stared at her. What kind of liens? Home improvement loans, primarily, all properly documented and paid off, but it suggests significant borrowing against the property's equity. The room started spinning. I never authorized any home improvement loans. Patricia leaned forward. Eleanor, when did you last check your credit report? I don't remember. Maybe 2 years ago. We need to pull your credit report immediately. If they've been intercepting your mail, there could be financial activity you're unaware of. As Patricia made calls to credit monitoring services, I sat in my kitchen realizing how naive I'd been. While I thought I was being a generous mother, they'd been systematically positioning themselves to take everything. The phone started ringing at 7:23 a.m. David's name flashed on the screen with the persistence of a smoke alarm. I let it go to voicemail while I made my morning coffee, the good stuff I'd bought myself for the first time in months, the kind that didn't require justifying the expense to anyone. The voicemail was exactly what I expect, Mom. We need to talk. There's some crazy woman calling about listing the house. Obviously, there's been a mistake. Call obviously, there's been a mistake. The phone rang again before I'd finished listening. This time, it was Melissa. I answered on the 4th ring. Good morning, Eleanor. What the hell is going on? Some real estate agent called David saying she's our listing agent now. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. Actually, Barbara Henderson is your listing agent. Melissa's voice climbed an octave. What are you talking about? You don't own the house anymore. We've been living there. Yes, owning it. No, the deed is still in my name, Melissa. It always has been. More silence. This time, I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. But, we've been maintaining it. We've put money into improvements. We painted the whole upstairs with paint I paid for. I interrupted, along with the new washing machine, the roof repair, and every utility bill for the past 3 years. David's voice came through the speaker now. Apparently, I was on speakerphone. Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our home out from under us. Our home. The phrase hit like a slap. It stopped being our home, I said. When you started celebrating my absence on social media, what are you talking about? Melissa again, her voice softer now, threaded with guilt. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Ring any bells? Posted while I was in the emergency room yesterday. By the way, don't worry. I saw the photo. You all looked very happy to be rid of me. The line went quiet. In the background, I heard Chloe asking someone to help her find her math homework. When David finally spoke, his voice had lost its indignant edge. Mom, that post wasn't about you. Of course it wasn't. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision, just like all those times you've been too busy to return my calls weren't about me either. Just like forgetting my birthday last month wasn't about me. We didn't forget your birthday. You wished me happy birthday on Facebook 2 days late, which is about the level of effort I've come to expect. But here's what really bothered me. Patricia's credit report findings from yesterday were far worse than I'd admitted to them. David, I said carefully, we need to have a very serious conversation about finances, in person. Today, his voice became wary. What kind of conversation? The kind where you explained the $75,000 home equity loan taken out in my name 6 months ago. After hanging up, I did something I should have done years ago. I started making a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but an accounting dot. Every dismissed phone call, every canceled dinner plan, every time I'd been made to feel like an inconvenience in their carefully curated family life. The notebook filled faster than I expected. February 2024. Asked David to help move furniture in my apartment. He said he was busy with work, but posted ski trip photos the same day. January 2024. Invited to Chloe's school play. Melissa forgot to save me a seat. I stood in the back while strangers sat in empty chairs. December 2023. Christmas morning at their house. I brought gifts for everyone. They gave me a scented candle from the clearance rack. Sticker still on it. But it was what I found online that gutted me. Melissa's Instagram was a highlight reel of happiness. Hundreds of photos. David, Chloe, vacations I'd never heard of, dinners I'd never been invited to, birthday parties where I was conspicuously absent. The comments cut deepest. Where's David's mom? A friend asked under a restaurant photo. Oh, she's not really a social person anymore. Prefers to stay home, Melissa replied. Under a Christmas post. Lovely family, just the three of you. Melissa again. David's mother is going through some things. We're giving her space. Going through some things. Figuring herself out, as if I were broken, unstable. But the worst one. Chloe's 12th birthday party. A party I hadn't even known about until I saw the photos online. Someone asked, did Grandma Eleanor make it? David replied, Mom's gotten really demanding lately about attention and involvement. We decided it was better to keep things small and stress-free for Chloe's sake. Demanding about being included in my granddaughter's birthday. That comment rearranged everything I thought I knew about the last 3 years. They hadn't been protecting me. They'd been protecting themselves from me. I wasn't the grieving widow who needed space. I was the inconvenient obligation they needed to manage. But Patricia's findings from the credit report were still haunting me. The home equity loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards I'd never opened, personal loans I'd never signed for, and purchase patterns that painted a picture of people living far beyond the means I provide. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom, can we please talk about this reasonably? We're family, Fee typed back. You're a thaw revelation that shattered unable to sleep. I followed Patricia's advice and checked my accounts online. What I found made those heart palpitations feel like the home equity loan wasn't just $75,000. That was only the bigger 3 credit cards I'd never opened, each with limits between $15,000 and $20,000. A pistol tied to my old address, all in good standing because payments were being made from an account I had never opened. And the phone number listed with shaking hands. I opened the detailed statements. The charges painted a picture of a lifestyle IH. Melissa's yoga studio, $200 monthly. David's gym and trainer, $350 monthly. Chloe's private tennis lessons, $400 monthly lessons she'd never mentioned taking. Restaurants, thousands of dollars monthly. Designer clothes, spa treatments, weekend getaways. Then came December 2023, $8,000 to a resort in Mexico. Christmas, the year I spent alone because they wanted to keep things low-key. But the most recent charge made me physically sick. Jewelry purchase of $3,200 the exact day I was in the hospital. They'd been systematically stealing my identity for 18 months. I printed every statement, every forged signature, every account detail. By 5 a.m., I had a folder thick enough to choke a horse, but something else made my blood run cold. Inquiries. Multiple inquiries from law firms, financial institutions, and something called Elder Care Assessment Services. Patricia's words echoed in my head. This looks like preparation for a conservatorship case. They weren't just stealing from me. They were preparing to have me declared incompetent. Barbara arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with coffee, Patricia at her side. What did you find? Barbara asked, reading my face. Apparently, I've been funding their lifestyle for a year and a half, but there's more. Patricia flipped through the evidence. Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery. Eleanor, this is criminal. But these inquiries, they've been consulting elder law attorneys. They were building a guardianship case against you. The room spun. They were planning to make me legally powerless. Barbara leaned forward. Then the house sale just became urgent. But even more urgent is filing charges. If we don't move fast, they might accelerate their plan. My phone buzzed again, David calling from a different number. Melissa's texts flooding in. I ignored them. I wasn't their victim anymore. How fast can we file? I asked. Patricia smiled thinly. Today, by noon. The doorbell rang. Chloe stood outside my apartment, suitcase in hand, tears streaking her face. Grandma, please don't make us homeless. Mom says we'll have to live in the car. My heart broke. Using my 12-year-old granddaughter as a weapon was a new low. Sweetheart, come inside. She sank onto my couch. Outside, I spotted David's car parked down the street, close enough to monitor, far enough to pretend they weren't pulling the strings. They sent you here alone. Chloe nodded. Mom packed my bag. She said maybe if I talked to you, you'd remember family is supposed to take care of each other. The manipulation was almost insulting. Chloe, I said gently, did your parents explain why I'm selling the house? She shook her head. They just said you don't want us to be happy anymore. I sat beside her. Do you remember when Grandpa Tom died, and your family moved into our house? Yeah, to take care of it while you figured out what to do. That's right. But what if I told you your parents never saved for their own place? Instead, they used my name to borrow money for vacations and things you never even got to enjoy. Her brow furrowed. But Dad said we couldn't afford our own house because of his job. Then maybe they shouldn't have spent $8,000 on a trip to Mexico last Christmas. Her eyes widened. We didn't go to Mexico. I stayed with my friend Sarah's family. Mom and Dad said they were helping sick relatives. Cold horror washed over me. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd abandoned their daughter to fund their lies. I walked her downstairs, hand in hand. David rolled down the car window. Well, did you talk sense into her, Chloe? I leaned toward him. David, if you ever use your daughter as a pawn against me again, I'll add child endangerment to the criminal charges I filed this morning. His face strained of color. What charges? Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery, the $108,000 you've stolen from me. Melissa leaned across the seat. We haven't stolen anything. That money went to household expenses. Household expenses, like tennis lessons Chloe doesn't take, vacations she didn't go on, jewelry you bought while I was in the hospital. You're being dramatic, Melissa snapped. No, I said coldly. I'm being done. I opened the back door. Chloe, you're coming with me. 3 weeks later, Patricia's office looked like a war room, legal papers everywhere, associates buzzing like bees. The good news, Patricia said, adjusting her glasses, is that your son and daughter-in-law left a paper trail accountants will drool over. The bad news is this fraud has been going on far longer than we thought. Chloe sat beside me, listening intently. At 12, she was handling reality better than her father had at 38. The pattern goes back for years, Patricia continued. Mail redirections started right after Tom's funeral. Fraudulent accounts 18 months ago. They used your grief as cover for theft. There was something else, a background check. Before moving in with you, Patricia explained, David and Melissa lived with his elderly aunt Margaret. She died at 84. Left her house to a church. Afterward, the church's lawyers found financial irregularities. Money missing in her final months. I froze. A pattern. They never proved it. But the signs are identical. Chloe whispered. Is that why we moved in so fast after Grandpa died? Because they couldn't stay with Aunt Margaret anymore. Smart kid, smarter than her parents. At that moment, Nancy, my sister-in-law, called me. Eleanor, I've been worried. Is it true what David's saying? That you've had a breakdown and you're making things up? The narrative. Of course. Nancy, listen to me. I have documentation, bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent loans. This isn't grief. This is criminal abuse. She hesitated, then sighed. I believe you. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up earlier. I noticed how they talked about you. Like you were a burden they had to manage. Like they were protecting you from yourself. After hanging up, I looked at Patricia. They've been preparing this for months, haven't they? Patricia nodded grimly. It's a textbook setup. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, then swoop in as the concerned family asking for guardianship. The revelation that everything had been calculated hit me like ice water, Patricia explained. Eleanor, the inquiry pattern on your credit report isn't random. They were consulting multiple elder law attorneys. This was the groundwork for a conservatorship. They wanted legal control over your finances, your property, your life. I felt dizzy. They hadn't just stolen from me. They were planning to erase me. 3 weeks later, Patricia's office resembled a war room. Legal documents piled high. Investigators digging into every fraudulent account. The good news, Patricia said, is that David and Melissa left a clear paper trail. The bad news is, the fraud is deeper than we imagined. It goes back almost 4 years. Chloe sat beside me, clutching a stuffed bear. At 12, she was absorbing truths no child should have to hear. They began redirecting your mail after Tom's funeral. Fraudulent accounts started 18 months ago, but the setup was earlier. They used your grief as cover. Patricia slid a file toward me. There's more. Before they moved in with you, David and Melissa lived with his elderly Aunt Margaret for 2 years. She died at 84, left her house to a church instead of David. After her death, lawyers discovered irregularities, money missing in her last months. They never proved it, Patricia added. But the pattern is unmistakable. Chloe whispered, is that why we moved in with you so fast? Because they couldn't stay with Aunt Margaret anymore. Smart child, smarter than both her parents combined. Then Nancy, my sister-in-law, called me. Eleanor, is it true? David says you had a breakdown, that you're accusing them out of confusion. There it was, the narrative they'd crafted. Nancy, listen carefully. I have documentation. Bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent loans. This isn't grief, it's financial abuse. She exhaled. I believe you. I should have spoken sooner. I noticed how they made you look like a burden. They intercepted calls, told people you were too fragile. I'm sorry. I hung up and looked at Patricia. They've been preparing this image of me as incompetent for months, haven't they? Patricia nodded. Classic playbook. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, then move in for guardianship. The court date came. Patricia filed for emergency custody of Chloe, citing neglect, fraud, and abandonment. Chloe, sitting with her small hands folded, whispered to the judge, I don't want to go back. They lie. They left me at Christmas. The courtroom fell silent. The judge granted me temporary custody. David and Melissa looked furious, but powerless. Their carefully curated story that I was unstable collapsed when faced with evidence. The financial records, the fraudulent accounts, the vacation charges, Chloe's testimony. 6 weeks later, Barbara sold the house. Cash buyers, asking price. Standing in the empty living room, I felt both grief and relief. 35 years of love and memory with Tom, poisoned by 3 years of manipulation. Chloe traced her hand along the wall where her height had been marked. It's weird seeing it empty, she said softly. Everything looks different without furniture and lies, I replied. Barbara handed me the check. $400,000. Freedom, in paper form. Then the detective called. Mrs. Hartwell, we found something in their files. David and Melissa researched your husband's death. Insurance payouts. Estate paperwork. They mapped your finances within weeks of the funeral. And we found draft conservatorship documents. They were planning to file next month. What stopped them? I asked. You did, by fighting back. Instead of playing the helpless widow, you disrupted their plan. Now they don't look like caring family members. They look like criminals. One evening, Chloe and I sat on my balcony with Chinese takeout, something simple, unapproved, no committee discussions like in her parents' house. Grandma, are Mom and Dad going to jail? She asked. They're going to face consequences, I answered gently. What kind depends on whether they take responsibility or keep lying. She nodded solemnly. I hope they learned something. Me too, sweetheart. A month later, an unexpected call came from Jennifer Wells, Melissa's estranged sister in Seattle. Double quotes Mrs. Hartwell. I need to tell you something. When I called Melissa last week, she admitted they'd planned guardianship for months. She bragged about collecting recordings, photos, testimony, to make you look incompetent. My stomach twisted. And there's more, Jennifer said. This isn't Melissa's first time. 15 years ago, she did this to our grandmother. Grandma Rose was 82, healthy, independent. But Melissa moved in after a fall. Within a year, Grandma was in a nursing home. Melissa had power of attorney, $200,000 gone. All of it. My hands shook. Would you provide a sworn statement? Absolutely. I even saved documents. I should have warned you years ago. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. This was a predator who preyed on the elderly, who saw grief as opportunity. 18 months later, I sit on the deck of my new home in Asheville, North Carolina. Chloe is building a treehouse with my neighbor's grandson. The legal cases are done. David pled guilty to identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse. 2 years in prison. Full restitution of $127,000. Melissa got 18 months of community service. Though Jennifer's testimony made her look far less innocent, the restitution process recovered about 60% of what was stolen. The rest I let go. What mattered was not the money, but the truth. Their narrative, me as dramatic, unstable, incompetent, was destroyed in court. Chloe lives with me now, permanently. The judge heard how they left her behind while they vacationed, how they lied about sick relatives. He ruled they had forfeited their parental trust. Joe, she thrives here, new friends, a safe school, and adults who don't lie. We both go to therapy, learning how to heal after years of gaslighting and exclusion. My house has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and enough land for Chloe to run free. She laughs, now really laughs, not the careful laughter I used to see in her parents' staged photos. I volunteer at the Elder Abuse Prevention Center now. I teach people the signs: redirected mail, sudden financial changes, relatives who help too much. People ask if I regret how things turned out. The answer is simple. I regret waiting 3 years to fight back. I regret letting guilt convince me temporary was okay. But I don't regret fighting. I don't regret protecting my granddaughter. What I have now is peace. Real peace. Not the fragile kind where you avoid conflict to keep the family happy. The deep peace that comes from refusing to be anyone's victim. David calls from prison sometimes, asking for commissary money, help with appeals. Chloe rarely answers. Trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. But I no longer live under their shadow. This morning, Chloe hammered a sign onto her new treehouse. It reads, Eleanor and Chloe's Clubhouse. No drama queens allowed. Smart girl. She already knows, the ones who call you dramatic are usually the ones creating all the drama. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.